viewers. You're once again tuned in to the Jctr Corner, a weekly show that is brought to you by the Jesuit Center for Theological Reflection in conjunction with Loyola TV. Today we look at children, and the biggest question that many people ask is obviously, do children have rights? But what length can these rights be respected? And we have so many questions that we need to talk about today, and our guest this week is a young man. I would call him a young man because looking at his physical appearance, you really look like a man. So our guest today is a young man by the name of Musowe Like, who is a child rights activist at the Media Network on Children's Rights and Development. Musowe, welcome to the program. It's good to have you around.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here.
Okay, so first things first, let's talk about your activism. What is involved in being a child rights activist, and what exactly do you do?
All right, that's a very interesting question. What exactly do I do? Well, I started my journey in 2016 at Media Network on Child Rights and Development. But before that, I was involved in a lot of activities. My activism is basically centered on issues that have to do with children and issues that mainly affect children in general. So what I do basically as an activist is that I write articles on issues that have to do with children. So mostly these articles are published in newspapers, and one newspaper that our organization uses is the Globe newspaper. Aside from that, my activism mainly is also involved on platforms like the media, because I belong to Media Network. So we do our activism on through media. Yeah. So basically that's what I do. But outside media outside the media, I also have group discussions with my friends, and we talk about issues that affect children. Apart from that, I work with different organizations that look at the welfare of children. One such organization is Civil Society for Poverty Reduction, but looks at how the budget is shared, or how the budget is when it comes to children. And we've got a specific program that engages the key stakeholders, which is the government on this one. So there's a program called the National Children's Parliament, which I'm part of it. So we try as much as possible to put the key stakeholders to accountable on how the budget is. But basically, my activism is generally on children and how, and the issues that affect children.
So in short, you operate you operate based on the premise that children rights must be recognized, must be respected, and children must be protected. Yeah.
Yes.
So how then do you ensure that children are recognized, children are protected in that area?
All right. There's a very common saying that nothing for children without children, and the issue that has to do with people saying that we speak for the voiceless is somewhat coming to an end, because we try as much as possible to give each and every child a voice out there. So these children, they're not only protected, their rights are not only recognized, but on my individual level and that of Media Network on Child Rights and Development, we ensure that the rights of children are able to survive, and we uphold mainly their interests. So we draw back to the UNCRC, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. So that is where we can say, or that is where our measurements are, to ensure that the rights of the children out there are recognized, protected, and upheld.
I love the fact that you operate on the UN Convention's rights. So what would you then say are some of the important rights that a child should know, a child that should have, that probably we take for granted for? Would you highlight some of the rights that we need to know, and some of the rights that children really need to understand and know out there?
All right, so I would say rights are rights, because these are entitlements that each and every child has. So I would categorize them into two, because there are those rights that are too technical, the ones that are enshrined in different documents around Africa and around the world. And then there are those that are too basic for children to understand. So rights like right to shelter is something that a child knows, that when it's 18 hours or when it's 15 hours, I need to go home, or when it's raining, I need to be inside. And then there's this right to clothing. So children know about these rights, and they understand that I cannot be walking around the streets minus me wearing clothes. But there are those technical rights that children need to actually understand, and they're enshrined in different documents. For example, when you go through the UNCRC, you find that there are 4 principles that talk about the rights of children, and they are actually summarized in that document. So the first right that talks about the best interests of the child. A practical example is that of a child that is playing with fire, or maybe a matchbox. As an adult, you know that when a child gets burnt, it's going to be something that will be costly, something that will be disturbing to maybe to the family. So when you get the matchbox from a child, you are protecting the interest of that particular child. And then there is survival and development. Survival and development in most cases looks at the health of that particular child, the facilities that are there. Are they child friendly? When you look at the nutrition of that particular child, are they getting the right nutrition for them to survive and develop? Are they getting the right nutrition for them to develop and survive in this society? Putting into context that we are also facing an unprecedented pandemic of the COVID-19. So all these are issues that surround the technical aspects that have to do with the children's rights. But there's also non-discrimination that talks about gender equality, and there's also so basically, so those are some of the technical rights that children might not understand, but they need to try as much as possible to have keen interest in those particular rights, so that they might be aware when they're abused, they know where to report such cases.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Well, in case you're just joining us, this is the Jctr Corner, and today we are looking at child's rights and protection. In the studio, I'm joined by Musoe, a child rights activist who is helping us enlighten, shed more light on the topic. So Musoe, my other question would be, would you say that the majority of the children today are aware of their rights?
They are. Most children are aware of their rights, but the problem that comes into play is that they don't understand the responsibilities that come with these rights. And that is a very sad point of it. The basic rights that I talked about, right to shelter, right to food, right to education, and the like. A practical example that I would give on right to education is that the child knows that I need to go to school and they're in class. And then you find that by the end of the day, they're missing classes, they're not writing notes, they're not always in school. So that's a responsibility that they need to know that as a child, I need to ensure that I'm always in school for me to have a better future. But most children are aware of these rights, but the responsibilities that come with these rights, they don't put them into consideration. So that's where the problem is.
Okay, would you say then that those in authority, the parents, the leaders, generally our population in Zambia, do we really respect children's rights?
I would say yes, and I would say no. The reasons are as follows. Our society has been put into classes or into categories. There's that part of society where the civil society, like civil society organization, belongs. And then there's that general citizenry of our country. And then there's a government again. So on the side of the civil society and other organizations, they've tried as much as possible to ensure that the rights of children in Zambia are upheld. For example, Media Network on Child Rights and Development, Save the Children, Civil Society for Poverty Reduction, and many other organizations that promote children's rights. They understand these rights. But when it comes to the general citizenry of our country, you find that most of the people they know about their rights, but they just don't mind that children have got rights. They think children are not part of the society. And up to now, children are underestimated, that they cannot be in key decision-making processes. So by the end of the day, these rights on the other side of the general citizenry, they are not recognized. Yeah.
Maybe let me take you backwards. How would you define a child? This was supposed to be a first question before we start unwrapping all these issues. Maybe that's why we miss it.
Yeah.
How do we define a child?
That's very interesting. People tend to think that children, they understand how a child is defined. Unfortunately, they only know the definition of who a child is, but they don't internalize or they don't understand the definition. Well, documents that speak to this definition are a lot. And the practical example is the one that I earlier spoke of, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, that defines a child as any person that is below the age of 18. And in our constitution here in Zambia, we look at a child that is or below the age of 16. So it depends with different documents that a particular country is using to define a child. But using the UNCRC, that is how bestly a child is defined, and that is how big countries or big organizations understand a child as any individual below the age of 18.
I know that we have these international conventions about children and all that. So as a nation, would you say, are we faring well? Are we in the right direction with regards to the conventions that we are, let me say, signed to?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe before you respond to that question, let's just go for a short break. We'll come and continue the discussion on the other side. Viewers, do stay tuned to the Jctr corner. For now, we go for a short break. See you on the other side.
May we use these trying moments to rise to something that's important. Take life not for granted. Tell someone that you love them. If any of you have any COVID-19 symptoms, which are a fever of above 38 degrees Celsius, a cough, difficulty in breathing, shortness of breath, or chest pains, please do not hesitate to call 909 or 0974 49 35 53, and medical assistance will come your way. We hope for the better and leave everything in the hands of God. Together, we can combat COVID-19. Please stay at home for me. I stayed at work for you. Be that change.
Please do your best to stay at home. If you must leave your home, please remember to mask up. Keep social distancing of at least 1 meter and wash your hands often with soap and running water or any alcohol-based hand sanitizer.
Welcome back to the Jctr corner, and today we're looking at child's rights and protection. And in the studio, I'm joined by Musowe, who's a child's rights activist. So Musowe, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Before the break, I just posed the question that you need to pick up. So my question was, would you say that as a nation we are faring in the directions as to regards, or as far as the conventions and the laws are concerned about the children?
Yeah, I would say.
By the laws, I mean the international laws, the international treaties.
All right, yes. all right. Thank you very much. So there are different treaties that speak to the rights of children on an African level, on the world level. Mm-hmm. But as a country, I wouldn't qualify it to say we are faring well in that fraternity. I'll give a practical example. Mm-hmm. You might be aware that as of 2016, there was a referendum that was held during the general elections where they were voting on the Bill of Rights. Mm-hmm. And among the cardinal issues that were supposed to be put into play was a child code bill. But unfortunately, the bill wasn't passed. And to my surprise, up to now, the bill is still at Parliament grounds. The reason behind such kind of issues is it's because there's less sensitization in the general public. And it also speaks to the earlier question that you posed, because people don't, up to now, still don't recognize that they are children in Zambia. They don't recognize that children can play a critical role in the development of any particular nation. Mm-hmm. The only thing that speaks, as of now, in our constitution, the only thing that speaks of how children are protected is the Juveniles Act, Cap 53 of the laws of Zambia. So it speaks on how the court procedures on how a particular child can undergo a certain court trial. So issues surrounding a child that has actually broken the law. So that is the only part that our constitution speaks about. And the other part that the constitution speaks about is the definition of who a child is. So Zambia does not in any way qualify. And it's also a signatory to the UNCRC, the United Nations on the Convention of the Rights of the Child. And for the past years, the government has been working hand in hand with civil society organizations to ensure that there's promotion of children's rights. An earlier example that an example that I'll speak of is a practical one, the National Children's Parliament. So the National Children's Parliament is one kind of a unique parliament that started in 2016. So in 2016, there was only one member of parliament that took part in the parliament. From there, it grew. And as of 2019, the submissions that were made by children at the Extended Budget Committee at Parliament grounds were actually recorded in the report of that particular committee. So it shows that on part of the UNCRC, where it talks about participation and inclusion of children, the government is actually trying very hard to ensure that the voices of children are heard. And as of 2019, there was the National Children's Summit, where children from different parts of the country spoke about different issues that affect them. And there was also the presence of government there. So on a scale of 1 to 10, I would give, on the side of the government and the CSOs, I would give them 7 out of 10, because at least they've tried as much as possible to promote children's rights in the country. But the unfortunate part is that the general citizenry still don't recognize that children are part and parcel of this great nation.
Okay, I know that you're a member of the Children's News Agency under the Media Network on Child Rights and Development. So what role do you play in news agency?
So as Media Network on Child Rights and Development, one of its goals is to ensure that the rights of the children are heard, they are understood, and they are prioritized. So it tries as much as possible. It trains children, it trains different SOs, civil societies, and it trains journalists, and it equips them with necessary skills on issues that have to do with children's rights. So basically, that's where the organization revolves. And the role that it plays, that MNCRD plays in our agency, is that it strictly gives us media skills. I would boast that I've not attended any university, but the level that the organization has taken me is that I'm able to do media monitoring, I'm able to do article writing, I'm able to do news writing, I'm able to write, I can write a script, I'm able to I don't want to boast, but I'm able to confidently speak.
It is what you have.
Yeah.
Bring it out, bring it out. It might inspire someone out there who thinks they can't do anything because they are a child.
Yeah. So those are skills that children of this generation need to have, because we need to start appreciating that children are part and parcel of this organization. So that is a role that Media Network on Child Rights and Development plays in the organization, and the agency has got different children that are coming from different backgrounds. It goes as far as rural areas. When they were commemorating the International Day of a Girl Child, Save the Children and Media Network were in Eastern Province. So it shows that the organization is really on the ground and doing its work. So those are some of the things that Media Network does in the CNA.
That is well explained and articulated, Musoe. Let's talk about something that is hitting the news right now. By this, I mean the comprehensive sexuality education, also known as CSE.
Yeah.
As a child rights activist, what would be your comment concerning this particular hot topic about sexuality education in Zambia?
The first time that I heard that different people were talking about this issue, I firstly laughed, because I laughed about it because the arguments that they were bringing forward were arguments that, to me, did not gain grounds, because they did not exactly understand what comprehensive sexuality education is. I think by then they didn't even look at the curriculum on how this kind of education needs to be delivered to children. So it will be of your surprise that as of 2016, when you count 10 girls, only 3 had correct information on comprehensive sexuality education. And that posed a risk to a lot of girls, meaning that a lot of girls were at a risk of indulging themselves into illicit activities, and by the end of the day, risking their lives to HIV and AIDS, teen pregnancy, among other hot issues. So at first I laughed to this issue, but what the curriculum unfolds when you look at the CSE is that it tries as much as possible to speak to gender equality. It tries as much as possible to speak about puberty. It tries as much as possible to speak about reproductive health. So those are issues that the curriculum speaks about. And one interesting fact is that we need to try as much as possible to remove the notion from the general public that when you, I don't know if I'm allowed, but when you get the word sex does not basically mean intercourse. The word sex means the difference in gender, or the difference between two people. For example, what defines you as a girl and what defines you as a boy. So basically, these are terms that people now need to start understanding. And one point that I feel was so much controversial is the way CSE is brought out when they are teaching. And that is one thing that a lot of people were against, the way the terms are brought out. And on that particular part, I would give them, on a scale of 1 to 10, I would give them a 5. But you shouldn't base your arguments on such kind of thoughts, because you should call a spade and you cannot call it a shovel. So that would be my comment on the CSE. It is a good thing, because I'm a product of such kind of issues. As I earlier said in my introduction, that I belong to different organizations, and these organizations have got what we call peer educators. It would be of your interest to tell you that I'm coming from an area that is underrated. It is drug dense, Chiwolia, and it's because of CSE that has made me survive such kind of an environment.
So I have one interesting question to ask you. There's so many views about it, and I've already heard your view, but how then can we ensure that this CSE is put or advocated for in the best interest of the child?
So I said nothing for children without children. The best thing that different stakeholders that are putting arguments towards such kind as the CSE is that they need to ask children what they want. And the best interest of the child comes into play when the stakeholders look at the risks that are there when they withdraw the CSE from the curriculum in schools. What risk will it pose? Because statistics are alarming, and when statistics are alarming, it's going to pose a danger to this generation and the future generation, because we have a crop of then adults that don't understand and appreciate comprehensive sexuality education. And by the end of the day, we'll have a lot of children, a lot of adults that are sick, a lot of adults that don't know how to raise a baby properly. So that is what I would want to put up forth.
You are speaking of children being given a voice to be heard. What platforms do we have in Zambia? What platforms do we use, or do you use as a media network to ensure that children speak out and they're heard by the government at the end of the day?
All right, so under media network, there's what we call stakeholder engagement. Earlier this year, we engaged the Ministry of Gender on issues that have to do with gender. So those are some of the platforms that the organization uses to ensure that the key stakeholders, such as the government, get what children are actually saying on the ground. Yeah, so, and last time we also had I'm giving practical examples to say that we are really working on the ground. We had a joint media briefing at government complex where we also spoke on how COVID-19 has actually affected children with the Minister of Information. So those are some of the platforms that we use. Aside that, we've got radio shows, and as I earlier said, we also write articles in the Globe newspaper. We also have a magazine that speaks on different issues. Recently, as a team, as CNA, we are working on a magazine that talks about inclusive early childhood education, which will be published soon. So those are some of the platforms that we use to ensure that the voices of children are heard by the key stakeholders.
As we come to the end of the program, so what would you say be the way forward in terms of ensuring child rights are respected and the child is protected at all times and ultimately developed at the end of the day?
I'm happy that you've inclined your question to the UNCRC. Mm-hmm. It's high time that such kind of documents are taken seriously. Because I remember in school, the only thing that we did, or the only thing that we looked at under this document, was the definition and the things that are contained in. But it's high time that we start inculcating knowledge and ensuring that children appreciate that they've got rights. And the only way that we can ensure that these things happen is by making sure that children have got platforms to speak out when issues are not going in their favor. So those are the ways in which I would want to see the rights of the children are promoted, their interests are protected, and they're able to survive and develop in any kind of environment.
Okay. Well, so this is where we have to end. And thanks to you for coming. Thanks for giving a comprehensive explanation on what a child should know about their rights and protection. I'm so sure that we'll definitely call you back to unwrap some more topics, some more questions under this particular important topic. To the viewers out there, I would like to say thank you so much for watching. This has been the Jctr Corner with me, Annette Mlenga. Until next time, it's goodbye for now.